we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto got drunk and unexpectedly formed a harem with the Sailor Moon team. Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Everyone in the room thought about what Setsuna had just told them. They could go find Usagi, but it was a gamble. They would be gone for at least a month and had no real idea of how things were in the word that Usagi had gone to after the battle. Makoto was the first to speak up and said, "I'll go. I've got no relatives at home to worry about and I owe Usagi too much to just stand here when I could have helped." Inside her mind, Amy debated for a bit before coming to a conclusion and spoke up. "I'll go as well. I'll have to tell my mother, but it's worth it to go find Usagi." Rei then voiced her mind. "I'd like to go, but my father is having me go with him on an ambassadorial tour of Europe. There's no way I'm going to let him find out about the scouts." Minako glumly looked down at her lap and said, "My parents are taking a vacation in China and have decided that we're going as a family. They just wouldn't understand me disappearing for a month or more." Hakura looked at Michiru for a moment before nodding her head and saying, "I speak for both Michiru and I when I say that we're staying here. Someone needs to protect Earth, and that has been the Outer's traditional duty." Hotaru, who had been as quiet as a church mouse, then spoke up. "I'll go with you to find Usagi." Hotaru had been having a difficult time at the loss of Chibi Yusa and her father. She had been staying with the Sakinos and wanted to repay them for their kindness. Setsuna thought that it was interesting that half of both the inners and outers would be going to retrieve the princess. Setsuna's thoughts were interrupted when Akuko coughed and said, "If it's all right, I would like to come along as well." Setsuna raised an eyebrow at this because she thought it was strange that the meek housewife would want to go off into the unknown. "You do realize the dangers, Mrs. Sakino," Setsuna said in a matter-of-fact tone. Akuko just turned to look Setsuna in the eye and said a firm voice that brooked no argument, "Usagi is my daughter, I'm going with you." Setsuna knew that the discussion was closed and said, "That's fine with me, I just wanted to make sure you understood what was going on." Setsuna then turned to face the people who were going and said, "Pack what you need. Make sure that what you pack clothing that is durable and functional. You should also bring a book or two in order to keep from being bored. We will all meet back here at 8 a.m. I will then transport us all to the Pluto Royal Palace, where I shall then transfer us to the dimension where the princess is." Everyone nodded their heads, showing that they understood Setsuna's directions before leaving to take care of things. Naruto verse. Naruto was sitting in a field right outside his and Luna's cottage thinking about how Team 10's last mission had gone. Ino and Kiba had taken the news that his mother was a reincarnated princess and that it was from her that he derived his bloodline. Naruto was happy that he was able to get away with just revealing that much of himself to them. Don't get Naruto wrong, he cared for and respected each of his teammates a great deal. However, he wasn't sure if they could handle all of his secrets at once with their current level of maturity. When it was all said and done, Team 10 was closer after the talk than they had been before the mission started. After they had escorted Ryuga to his destination, Ryuga gave them a large bonus. When Ino had asked why he had done that, Ryuga answered, "I endangered you and put you in a situation where you shouldn't have been due to me taking that plant, and you stuck with me. Your bravery and hard work deserve to be rewarded." Naruto didn't say anything, but his respect for the merchant grew. All too often there were people who would try and weasel out of paying Ninja all of the money that a job was priced at. Naruto's mind left the mission and focused on what had happened when they had gotten back to Konoha. Once Team 10 had given their mission report to the Hokage and was turning to leave, Sarutobi had asked Naruto to stay behind a minute. Sarutobi had then told Naruto, and Naruto focused in really hard at what Sarutobi had told him. "Naruto, I've managed to get all of the Namikaze properties and assets transferred over to the Sakino clan. The Sakino clan, as under the clan reorganization law in all elemental countries, is as of this moment the legal successor to the Namikaze clan, holding all rights, privileges, and responsibilities of the previous clan. You, Naruto, are now the legal head of the Sakino clan. Even if due to weird circumstances an elder relative of your late mother were to appear, you would be the clan head and to the hypothetical person. It was a lot of responsibility that came with being a clan head, even more so for a noble clan head like Naruto now was due to a law that was passed stating that the family of a Hokage automatically became a noble clan. He would be expected to manage clan finances and attend council meetings. Naruto would also be expected to show up at important functions. Luckily for Naruto, he could use the common practice of a proxy stand-in and have Luna go to the meetings for him, and she could help him with the finances. The thing that had Naruto uncomfortable was his potential marriage status. As a small clan with less than 50 members, it was socially expected that Naruto would take a few concubines in addition to a wife in order to make sure that the clan didn't die out. Also with his bloodline, which he had decided would be officially known as Tsukusenshi, or Moon Warrior, it would be expected even more for him to have several children with several different women. The major crux of the problem with having multiple wives, and Naruto intended to have the girls as his brides instead of just leaving them with the second-class rank of concubine, was the women in question. Naruto wanted a woman that he married to have a strong will, to genuinely like him, able to think for herself, and be willing and able to defend herself should she be attacked. However, Naruto figured that the kind of woman he liked would never want to share him even if pressure was put on by the council. Naruto didn't have any illusions that he would stay hated by the council all of his life. Naruto also figured that he would never be loved by the council as well. However, once the council found out about his bloodline and the fact that it had allowed him to destroy the Kyuubi, Naruto figured that they would want to see it continue and expand. At that point, his being the son of the Yondaime would just be extra icing on the cake for the greedy council members. Having it known throughout the elemental countries that Konoha possessed such a strong bloodline like the Moon Warrior bloodline would increase the number of clients that Konoha received. Knowing these facts, Naruto focused his resolve on the kinds of women he would marry. Naruto had seen the kinds of girls that chased after Sasuke and realized that he would probably have girls like that after him as well once the situation was known to the public at large. Those fangirls were not the kinds of women that Naruto wanted to have and raise his children with. If he couldn't find a decent wife or two in Konoha, Naruto determined to look elsewhere in another village. Sailor verse. Setsuna and her fellow dimensional travelers appeared in the middle of the Pluto Royal Palace's greeting hall. The hall was different than most of the architecture of the Silver Millennium due to the fact that the hall and the palace's style was similar to the Gothic style, instead of the Greco-Roman style that most of the Silver Millennium used. Setsuna motioned for her fellow travelers to follow her with their suitcases and started talking as they walked. I'm sure you're all surprised at the architecture of the palace. It was constructed under my ancestor King Radamanthus, who said that he wanted the palace to be a unique building fitting for the unique status that the Pluto royal family has, protectors of the time gates. To be honest, the palace and its unique architecture was the biggest source of trade for Pluto due to tourists. Setsuna led the group outside the main palace building and into the open palace complex. All of her guests were awed to see that they were in the open air and could hardly believe that they were actually on Pluto. Setsuna gave her guests a minute to just take in the view before saying with a raised eyebrow, I believe that we have an appointment to keep. Setsuna led the group into the building that contained the doorway to the time gates. She then led them to the chamber of the time gates. After making sure that the door was locked and everyone had what they needed, Setsuna placed her time staff into a grove in the center of the floor and started chanting. Omicron Lordos Otun Pylon, Mas Cathodige Kathos Diaskizum Autos Tu Sepabolus Dromus Metaxi Auto Tu Tapino Cosmo Pu Stecomast Apano Torakai Ekinos Omicron Cosmos Gia Tun Opoyo Epithemum Na Pam. Dectite Auden 10 Tapine Prosphorotes Dynames At Ost Essace Dyname Na Men Ist 0 Chi Na Empataset to Taxity Mas. Mas Chorgest 10 Eulogia Sas Chi Epitrapes Se Mas Gia Na Paraset Metaxi. O Lord of Gates, guide us as we cross these treacherous roads in between this humble world we stand on now and that world for which we desire to go. Accept this humble offering of power so that you might not be angry and impede our journey. Grant us your blessing and allow us to pass between. The floor of the chamber became covered in glowing green glyphs. Then the door of the time gates glowed with a strange dark green energy. Suddenly a bright flash of light blinded all within the room, causing them to lose consciousness. Naruto verse. Luna was currently taking a good look around the cottage that had been her and Naruto's home for so long. Soon, at the latest by the end of the Chunin exams, she and Naruto will have relocated to the former Namikaze, now Sakino, clan house. Now don't get Luna wrong, she had nothing against the clan house. However, this small cottage had been where Naruto's first steeps had been, where she had heard his first words of Untai Una, and so many more precious memories were held. She had to fight back a tear when she had learned that Sarutobi had graciously handed the deed to the cottage over Sakino clan. Still, however much Luna loved the old cottage, she knew that necessity required Naruto to soon move into the larger clan house. As a noble clan, it would be an insult to the village for the Sakino clan to be resided in a cottage instead of an ancestral estate. Also, the cottage would be big enough to hold her, Naruto, and Naruto's future wives. Wives, the word left a sour taste in Luna's mouth. Being born and raised in an egalitarian, mild matriarchal society, Luna saw the idea of multiple women sharing the same man to be, well, wrong. Sure, situations like this did occasionally arise during the Silver Millennium. What do you expect with a population of 600 billion? However, those were rare cases and people tried to keep such incidences hushed up. While Luna didn't like the idea of polygamy, especially for her precious Naruto, she had grudgingly given the plan her full support. As much as it pained Luna to admit it, this was not the Silver Millennium where people measured their lifespans in centuries. The old way of having one or two children for the noble families just wasn't smart in the world now. The lunar royal family had come too close to extinction for Luna's comfort, and the multiple wives would definitely ensure the survival of Naruto's family. Besides, she was proud that Naruto was at least thinking about finding good, healthy, strong girls to marry and wasn't using this as an excuse to fool around like a good deal of his classmates would have. Luna was brought out of her thoughts by a flash of light to her right. Turning around, Luna saw to her shock Sailor Pluto standing in her kitchen. Overcoming her shock, Luna cried out, "Sailor Pluto! When did you get here?" Setsuna raised an eyebrow and said, "Why are you so shocked, Luna? Surely you figured that it would only take a month or two for us to find you and the princess, even though you were flung into a different dimension." Before Luna could respond, Naruto came charging into the house with a kunai drawn. Naruto positioned himself in between Luna and Setsuna with a threatening growl on his face. In a rather annoyed voice, Naruto said, "Who are you and what are you doing in my Aunt Luna's house? Don't you dare claim that Auntie Luna invited you in, because there's only one door in the house and I know you didn't come through the door." Setsuna was shocked to see a boy about the scouts age jump in front of her and threaten her. All of this, because the boy thought that she was threatening Luna. But why did the boy refer to Luna as Aunt Luna? Also, why was there something in the boy's eyes that seemed so familiar to Setsuna? Setsuna was determined to find out the answer to this and decided to start asking questions. "What is your name, boy? I mean no threat to your aunt. If I truly meant harm to her, you wouldn't be around anymore." Naruto's eyes narrowed as he said, "Don't take me so lightly, intruder. I may only be a genin, but you'll find that you will regret messing with me or anyone I hold precious. I'm Naruto Sakino, and anyone who threatens my family will wish they were never born." Setsuna's face paled with shock when she heard Naruto stated his name. It couldn't be. Setsuna's mind clammed even though her heart was telling her it was true. Setsuna tried to dispel the thoughts that were bubbling in the back of her brain by glancing at Naruto's face. Looking into Naruto's eyes, Setsuna could see Usagi looking back at her through them. Setsuna's mind overloaded as the implications of what she had heard and seen. This caused her to do the only thing she could. She fainted onto the floor. Setsuna slowly awoke to find that she was lying on a soft bed with a patchwork quilt covering her. Setsuna turned her head to find herself looking into the eyes of a worried Luna in cat form. Putting her hand on her head, Setsuna groggily said, "Luna, what in the goddess's name is going on?" Luna closed her eyes for a moment before saying, "Why don't you follow me downstairs, Sailor Pluto? Things aren't as you seem to think they are." Luna then got off the bed and led Setsuna downstairs. When the two ladies came downstairs, Luna led Setsuna over to the dinner table where Sarutobi was calmly smoking his pipe. Luna sat down on the table and, with a paw motioning to Sarutobi, introduced her two guests. "Sailor Pluto, this is Sarutobi, the Sandaime Hokage and leader of this village. Sarutobi, this is Setsuna, Sailor Pluto and the protector of the time gates." Setsuna gave Sarutobi a curt nod, which Sarutobi responded to, before she sat down at the table. Luna turned to face Setsuna and said, "Don't worry about having to hide anything from the Hokage. His is one of the most trustworthy persons in the village and was one of Usagi's confidants." Setsuna's face showed her confusion and fear at Luna's use of the past tense. However, before Setsuna could voice a question, Luna held up a paw and said, "Before you say anything, I think you need to know the situation here. You say that you were looking for me and the princess for a month, correct?" Setsuna nodded her head, not liking what her gut was telling her. Luna took a deep breath before she started to tell her tale to Setsuna. "Sailor Pluto, Usagi and I arrived here in this world about 18 years ago. We were found by a team of ninja and taken here to the village of Konoha. A while after that, Usagi fell in love with Minato Namikaze, the leader of the team that found us. They were married about 16 years ago in an absolutely breathtaking, beautiful ceremony. Soon after the wedding, Minato had risen to become the Yondaime Hokage. However, 14 years ago, this village was attacked by the Kyuubi no Kitsune. The Kyuubi was a demon whose power was only marginally weaker than Metallica when that dark entity destroyed the Silver Millennium. Many people died during that foul creature's assault on this village. The Princess W was one of the casualties of the attack. Her husband heroically stopped the Kyuubi by offering his soul crystal to be devoured by the Shinigami for the power to stop the demon. Naruto is Usagi's and Minato's only child, born on the night of the Kyuubi's attack. Usagi died only minutes after naming Naruto once he was born. However, Naruto's real tragedy involves the defeat of the Kyuubi. You see, Minato couldn't destroy the Kyuubi even with the help of the Shinigami like Usagi could have if she was alive. Minato was forced to seal the Kyuubi away, and the only thing strong enough to keep the demon trapped was a newborn child. That's right, Sailor Pluto. Minato sealed the Kyuubi away within his only son Naruto. Sarutobi saw that the tale had become too painful for Luna to continue to tell, and so he jumped in to inform the shocked Setsuna of what she needed to know. It was Minato's dying wish that the village see Naruto as a hero for being the living prison that would keep us safe from the wrath of the Kyuubi. Sadly, most of the villagers have refused to see Naruto for what he is and had blamed him for the destruction caused by the Kyuubi. I truly hope that they repent of their folly when they learn that Naruto has, thanks to the power he has inherited from his mother, destroyed the demon sealed within him. Setsuna sat there in her chair frozen in shock. Once again she had failed the royal family. First she hadn't been there to help defend the lunar palace from the attack by Metallica, and now she hadn't been there to help her princess. Why couldn't she, when it really mattered, not be there for her friends? Queen Serenity had been her closest friend and the princess had been like a niece to her. She should have been there to help both her queen and her princess, and instead she was the time gates scratching her head trying to figure out what was wrong. In an uncharacteristic display of emotion, Setsuna let a tear slip down her cheek as she slammed her fists on the table and said, "Damn it. I should have been there for her. What kind of a guard am I if I can't even protect the person I swore I would protect?" Luna hopped off the table and transformed into her human form. The now human Luna wrapped her arms around the crying Setsuna and said, "Don't worry, Sailor Pluto. You tried your best to reach the princess. You know that Usagi wouldn't want you to be crying over her. Even Naruto, once he found out who you are, is worried about you. Don't let the past eat at you, Sailor Pluto. I've seen it happen to people around the village, and trust me, you don't want to go down that road. If you want to make it up to the princess, then help me take care of Naruto and help him achieve his dreams." It took her a few minutes, but Setsuna was able to get her emotions under check. Setsuna then said, "I didn't come alone. Amy, Makoto, Hotaru, and Naruto's grandmother came with me to this dimension. The spell that I used to allow us to come here will not allow us to go back until at least a month has passed. Hokage, may we stay in your village?" Sarutobi just smiled his grandfatherly smile and said, "Of course you and your party may stay in Konoha. Friends of Usagi are always welcome guests as long as I rule Konoha. Although, I think that you will have to move into the Sakino clan house a bit sooner, Luna." This little bit of humor brought a small smile to Setsuna's lips. Perhaps, the Senshi of time thought, things would be alright. It was early morning and Makoto was currently in the kitchen of the Sakino clan house making breakfast for all of the people there. As she made breakfast, Makoto thought about the previous few days. It had taken a few days for Naruto, Luna, and their interdimensional guests to get themselves fully straightened out in the Sakino clan household. It had also been a major shock for the scouts in Akuko to find out that Usagi was dead. However, their shock and pain did not stop them from taking a liking to Naruto. The story that was being told around town was that the scouts in Akuko were from across the sea and had arrived here looking for Usagi. Once it was discovered that Usagi was Naruto's mother, the drugstores were making a killing selling headache and indigestion meds to the villagers. However, most of the younger kids hadn't figured out why the older people in the village were acting so strange about who Naruto's mother was. Makoto thought more about this strange world that she was currently in. The things that these ninja were capable of just amazed the Senshi of wood. In fact, she had, and rather timidly for her, asked Naruto if he wouldn't mind teaching her some of the ninja's abilities. Naruto had told her to wait for an answer as he had to check something. A few hours later, Naruto told her at supper that, because the scouts were sworn to serve and protect his house first and foremost, they were considered by Fire Country law to be his servants. This meant that it was perfectly okay for any of the scouts to learn about chakra and how to use it, as they, via his oath of service to Konoha, were members of the village. After that, Naruto had shown her to the Sakino clan library and directed her to some beginner books on chakra. The pride that Naruto had spoken of when he talked about being a ninja and, to a slightly lesser extent, protecting Konoha had caused Makoto to realize something. Naruto was determined to prove himself here in the elemental countries. The boy's heart was in Fire Country and Konoha. Naruto would not want to return to Earth in a month when they were able to use the spell again. Naruto may eventually want to visit Earth, but he would never want to live there. This fact caused Makoto to develop an uncomfortable lump in her throat. She had sworn a while ago that she would never abandon Usagi or her children. That she would serve and protect Royal Moon family with all her might. However, Makoto didn't know if she had the strength to spend the rest of her life here in Konoha. True, she had no real ties holding her to Earth except for the other scouts after her parents had died. Still, Earth was familiar to Makoto and she was just used to how things went on over there. Makoto shook her head. She's still plenty of time before she would have to worry about something like that. Makoto put the breakfast dishes on a tray and carried them into the dinner room where everyone was sitting and waiting for her patiently. After placing the tray on the center of the table, Makoto sat down to Naruto's right. Naruto was sitting at the head of the table. Makoto and Amy were each sitting next to him, followed by Hotaru and Setsuna. At the foot of the table sat Akuko with Luna in her cat form on the table next to the Sakino matriarch. Although it put a cramp in his early morning training, Naruto had insisted that, unless outside events dictated otherwise, everyone would eat breakfast and dinner together as a family. When Amy had asked Naruto why he insisted so strongly, he had said, "I've seen other clans become fragmented. I want to ensure that the Sakino family in the future doesn't fall prey to such idiocy. Having a clan rule that all members of the clan eat their meals together will hopefully help my future descendants remain united." Breakfast was rather quiet as everyone was busy eating. Amy mentioned that she was scanning in the text of the Sakino clan library into the Mercury computer so that they would have a backup in case something happened to the written records. Naruto politely thanked Amy for her initiative, which caused her to start sporting a blush. Naruto finished his meal and said, "Excellent meal, Makoto, I would like to have seconds. However, I need to be going to meet up with my genin team. See you later, everyone." Naruto then got up and, after giving Luna and Akuko a small kiss, left the room. The girl quietly continued eating their breakfast for a few minutes until Luna spoke up. "You know, scouts." At this, everyone at the table turned to face Luna. "Each of you would make an excellent bride for Naruto." At this, all of the scouts did a spit take and Akuko scowled. Akuko then turned to face Luna and said, "How can you even suggest such a thing, Luna? After all, Naruto is Usagi's only son. If anything, these girls would be like Naruto's aunts and not suitors. Besides, they're only 15 years old." Luna put up her paws in a gesture of surrender before she said, "They're around Naruto's age and girls that he respects. Due to the laws of the elemental countries, Naruto will, whether we like it or not, have to have several lovers in order to ensure that his bloodline doesn't die out. Also, Akuko, while I agree that the scouts except for Setsuna are rather young, they are at the age that a lot of girls start to marry in these lands. I think of Naruto like he's a son to me, and I want him to, at the very least, marry girls that he can respect and that can hold their own in this world. The scouts, you have to admit, fit that bill to a T. I wasn't trying to force them in any way to marry Naruto, just try to let them know of the possibility." Each of the scouts started to blush when they heard what Luna had to say. Makoto was screaming within her mind, "Great Luna, you just had to bring that up. I mean, yes, Naruto is handsome and a great guy. But how can you just suggest that we become part of a harem with him like it was getting a new dress?" Looking around the table at an annoyed Akuko and embarrassed scouts, Luna hoped that Naruto was having a good time with his team. Naruto was calmly walking down the streets of Konoha on the long way to Team 10's meeting point. Anko had told them to come an hour later than normal today because she would be in a meeting for various jonin. As Naruto came to an intersection in the road, he turned his head to see a girl that caught his attention. She had emerald eyes and yellow hair that was done up in 4 pigtails. The girl was currently walking alone and had a big fan on her back. When Naruto saw the girl's forehead protector lying around her neck, he knew that she was a Suna ninja. Naruto, who had developed a great ability to read faces, saw that the girl seemed to be lost or at least looking for something. Deciding to follow his gut feeling, Naruto calmly approached the girl and said in a polite tone, "Hello there, would you mind telling me your name and what it is you are looking for? I might be able to help you. I know what it is you need help finding." Tamari blinked her eyes as she saw and realized that a Konoha ninja was trying to help her. Part of her was flattered that someone wanted to help her without knowing who she was, another part of her was annoyed that he thought she needed his help. Seeing that Naruto was looking at her face and not her assets, the flattered part of Tamari's mind won. Tamari gave a slight smile and said, "Tamari of the desert, I'm looking for one of my younger brothers." Naruto gave a slight nod towards Tamari and said, "Naruto Sakino. I'll help you try and find your brother, but in an hour I'll have to leave to meet up with my teammates. Just out of curiosity, is your other brother, the one we're not looking for, back in Suna, and that's why you're not worried about him?" Tamari felt a strange feeling for a second when she heard Naruto's question and then forgot about the feeling. For some reason unknown to Tamari, she found herself opening up to Naruto and said, "I'm looking for the older of my 2 brothers, Kankuro. Gaara, the youngest of the 3 of us, shouldn't cause any trouble, at least not among the civilians for right now. Kankuro, I accept, will try to cause trouble, even though we're not supposed to, and Gaara will be mad if he does cause trouble." Naruto just nodded his head as he listened to Tamari describe Kankuro and what he was dressed in. However, a part of Naruto's mind was working at super speed to analyze Tamari, what she had told him, and importantly how she had acted when she spoke. Warning bells were going off for Naruto due to how Tamari had acted. Why should she be so afraid of her younger brother? It was obvious from the way she spoke about Kankuro that she didn't consider him much of a threat. So what was Gaara, the youngest sibling, like to scare the very self-assured Tamari? Breaking off his thoughts for later, Naruto took another sweep of the area around him and spotted his target. Turning to face Tamari, Naruto said, "If I'm not mistaken, that's your brother over there drooling at the cover of this month's Play Ninja issue in the window." Tamari looked over to where Naruto was pointing and narrowed her eyes. Tick over her eye, Tamari stormed over to where her brother was making a fool of himself and twisted one of his ears while putting his neck into a choke hold. Tamari hissed into Kankuro's ear, "And just what do you think you're doing, brother dear?" Naruto just shook his head as he watched the scene going on in front of him. An annoyed Tamari and embarrassed Kankuro made their way back to where Naruto stood. Knowing that he still had some time before he would have to worry about meeting his teammates, Naruto inquired, "Do you need any more help or are you two fine on your own for now?" Before either of the Sand siblings could answer that question, Naruto stepped in front of Kankuro to stop a running Konohamaru from running into the annoyed ninja. The present Sand siblings watched on in amusement as Naruto started to talk with the little boy. "Konohamaru, why were you running like that? Do you realize that you almost ran into the ninja my right who probably would reach harshly to you?" Konohamaru started to look down at his feet as he said, "But boss, there was this very ugly banshee with pink hair that attacked me." Naruto felt a headache start to come as he went through the people he knew that matched Konohamaru's description and then asked, "Konohamaru, what did you say before this banshee started to attack you?" Konohamaru started to smile with a big grin and said, "I was just telling my friends that I overheard a few jonin say that Sasuke must be gay." Naruto smacked his head and let out a groan. Hand over his eyes, Naruto stated, "Konohamaru, you're an idiot. You don't go repeating things like that, especially where the dreaded and pathetic life form known as rabid fangirls can overhear you. And to make matters worse, it was the biggest Uchiha fangirl that overheard you. Sakura may only be plain in looks and slightly below average in her practical ninja skills, but insulting Sasuke will turn her into an entity that even Anko would prefer to avoid." Naruto then turned his head towards a particular branch on a nearby tree. In a firm but not threatening voice, Naruto called out, "Why don't you join us out here instead of being in that tree?" Tamari and Kankuro started to get nervous when they saw Gaara's body flicker onto the nearby fence. Gaara turned to look at Naruto and said, "What is your name?" Naruto just smiled and said, "Naruto Sakino, and you are?" Gaara curtly said, "Gaara of the desert, I look forward to fighting you, Naruto Sakino." With that, Gaara started to walk away and was followed by his nervous siblings. Ino and Kiba were sitting in a meadow near Training Area 44 waiting for their two other teammates. Inside her mind, Ino started to complain to herself. "Where is Naruto? Ever since that mission where we encountered that Jakar guy, the world has gone on its head." The young mind mistress wasn't really mad at Naruto, rather she was mad that her entire worldview had been broken, the pieces stirred up, and then placed back together in a jigsaw puzzle. After a few minutes, Ino stopped ranting inside her mind and started looking at the situation from the beginning. She did this so that she could calm down and solve her problem. It just wouldn't do for a rising ninja such as herself to lose her head. In her mind, Ino started to talk to herself. "Alright Ino, let's look at the facts and see where they led." Naruto's mother was apparently a reincarnated princess from a powerful kingdom in another dimension. Still hard to believe that last fact about Naruto. No Ino, you've got to focus. Now the source of Naruto's bloodline, and I guess you can actually call it that, is his fast healing and his ability to draw energy from the moon. He told Kiba and me that he has another form which he claimed was 10 times stronger than his Senshi form. Less than a week after we get back from Konoha, things really start to go crazy. First, Naruto has friends and relatives from his mother's side come visit him. Ino knew that Naruto's visitors had come to Konoha via a spell, trying to find his mother even though the rest of the village had been told they were from over the ocean. Once the general villagers had heard that Naruto's mother was born Usagi Tuskino, they all started acting really strange. I mean, they always act around Naruto, but they used to get a scowl and wanted nothing to do with him. Now, a lot of them looked like they just found out they threw away the winning lottery ticket. I wish I could solve that problem. For the next few minutes, Ino's mind flashed through scenes that she had witnessed of Naruto in town lately with his out-of-town guests. In particular, Ino's mind focused on the blue-haired and the brown-haired girls that could usually be seen accompanying Naruto. Ino thought about these particular scenes and how the two girls interacted with Naruto. The blue-haired Amy seemed to be shy, not Hinata Hyuga shy, but shy nevertheless. The other girl, Makoto, seemed full of life and was willing to speak her mind no matter what. Both of them Ino knew were helping Naruto, Amy in research, and Makoto through little odds and ends that Ino didn't know all of. Ino felt a surge of emotion rising from within her. Suddenly a realization hit Ino with the force the legendary Tsunade's renowned right hook. Inside her mind, Ino whispered, "It can't be, I'm jealous of them. Why is it that I am jealous of Amy and Makoto when they want to spend time with Naruto? After all, I like Sasuke, right?" Ino brought up images of Sasuke within her mind, but the feelings that she used to feel at these thoughts didn't happen. Why was this so? Was it that she truly didn't like the Uchiha survivor anymore, or was it that she simply hadn't seen him in a while? Ino was shaken out of her mental musings when she heard Kiba get up and yell, "About time you got here, Moonfish." Ino turned her head to see Naruto walking towards them. Naruto's dark orange jacket was open so Ino could see his chest muscles covered by a black t-shirt. Also, Naruto's hands were in his pockets while his face was shining with his customary half grin. Ino almost let out a moan as she looked at her friend. Here she was in the middle of a crisis over who she liked, and Naruto had come in here looking like that. Naruto was oblivious to the problems he was causing Ino. He just sat down under a tree and started a chakra control exercise. 10 minutes after Naruto had joined his teammates, all members of Team 10 got up sensing that Anko was nearing their location. Anko walked into the meadow with her usual grin on her face before she started talking. "Okay, runts, I'm glad that you're all here on time. I have decided to allow you guys to have a shot in the Chunin exams." With that, Anko pulled out 3 forms from her trench coat pocket. All 3 genin accepted the permission forms from Anko without any questions asked. Anko then said, "You will need those forms in order to get into the Chunin exams. If you decide to go, bring those filled out forms to room 301 at the Ninja Academy by 9 o'clock a.m. Understand me? You 3 may not be able to make it to Chunin. However, I want you to understand the test and to see what it means to be a Chunin. Also, if you runts continue to grow like you have been, I wouldn't be surprised if you pass this or your next exam." Anko then left her 3 students to think over their options carefully. Amy Mizuno, arguably one of the smartest people to have ever lived, was currently in the Sakino family library busy at work scanning in the contents of the library into the Mercury computer. While the magical computer was hard at work storing the new information into its hard drive, Amy was herself reading with half attention a book on sealing techniques. The subject was just fascinating to Amy, who was drawn to its logical and methodical workings. Unlike Nin and Genjutsu, Funjutsu required accuracy and a great understanding of the power being shaped in order to produce its effects. However, even though Funjutsu was far more complicated and harder to perform, it had great benefits that would make any seal master a person to be feared. One thing about Funjutsu that grabbed Amy was their long-lasting effects. The Hyuga's Juken would have its chakra blocking effects dissipate after a few hours. On the other hand, a seal for blocking a person's chakra would last as long as it was designed for or until it was destroyed by someone who knew how to combat it. Also, seals could be fashioned to do a multitude of tasks. Over the past couple of days, Amy had read about how there were seals for security, seals for preservation, and seals to collect energy. However, those high-level seals were mostly unknown to the population who thought of seals as in explosive notes and a sealing scroll. While Funjutsu was a neglected ninja art for most people, Amy was dedicating her free energy to becoming a seal mistress. Already in her mind were bubbling various ideas for seals she could create. Some of the seals Amy was half dreaming up were vast creations that would be better called a seal array than seals. In her mind's eye, Amy saw a hybridization of Silver Millennium magic and ninja seals. They would have the power to do things that would make even a seal master go starry-eyed. Amy was shaken out of her fantasy when she heard the door to the library open up. Amy shook her head and turned to look at who was entering the library. A blush started to form on Ami's face when she saw that it was Naruto who had entered the library. Naruto had decided to leave his usual orange jacket off, so Amy was greeted by a view of Naruto's rather well-developed muscles. The rather shy genius just politely greeted Naruto before she ducked her head back into her book. After giving Amy a cheerful greeting, Naruto picked up a book and started to read it in a seat across from Amy. Without any indication to the outside world, Amy was having a fierce debate within her soul. Oh my, Naruto sure is handsome. No, Naruto's is Usagi's son, which makes him off limits. Why does that make him off limits? He is our age after all. B because we went to school with Usagi, I was best friends with Usagi, I should be more like an aunt to Naruto. But Usagi was dropped off in this dimension over 18 years ago. That would make her closer to your or her own mother in age. Besides, if Usagi knew of the time discrepancy, she would wholeheartedly support us betting Naruto. Amy almost passed out and wondered where that last thought came from. Usagi was a kind and generous girl, and from what Amy had heard from Luna and Naruto's teacher Anko, Usagi had not changed at all in that regard while she was alive. It wouldn't be too far of a stretch to see Usagi agreeing or even encouraging Naruto to get together with her or Makoto. Within her mind, Amy continued to debate the situation with the part of her that was acting like the devil's advocate. Even if Usagi would have accepted me dating Naruto, there is no way she would accept me BB bed. At the moment, the other part of her cut her off and said, why wouldn't Usagi accept us roping Naruto into a first-class flight to Cloud 9? After all, Naruto will need help in restoring his clan. Who better than some dear old friends who knew his mother, are compassionate, understanding, helpful, and will spend the next 1,000 years with him. At that point, Amy found herself losing her opposition to the idea, and she was sure that she didn't want that to happen. Amy got up and said, "Excuse me, Naruto, I'm just going to take care of something." Once gave Amy his foxy smile, Amy determined that she needed a long cold soak in the tub. At 8 a.m. sharp, the three genins of Team Maelstrom met at the pre-appointed crossroad. Each of them was in their usual ninja attire, but they were loaded with their full mission supply scrolls. They all expected to be able to pass the exam and wanted to be prepared for whatever may come their way. Naruto took point as he led his two teammates over to the academy. Less than 10 minutes later, Team Maelstrom calmly walked into the academy. After walking up a flight of stairs, they were surprised to see people clamoring around room 301 feet. Naruto, Ino, and Kiba looked at each other and said simultaneously, "Genjutsu." After that, the three continued walking up the stairs until they reached the real room 301. Well, good to see that you three runts didn't embarrass me by falling for that clever pretest. The three genin turned as one to face their smirking teacher Anko. On hearing the sarcasm dipping from Anko's mouth, Ino said, "Who was the idiot who put up that pathetic genjutsu? It was so weak that only a complete moron could be caught in it. They should have at least made it so that you would think you've gone up another flight of stairs first." Anko pulled out a dango stick and said between bites, "The genjutsu test was set up by few of the councilmen. However, they lowered the level of the genjutsu after a councilman's son was kicked out of the exam due to being caught by the genjutsu. The Hokage still hasn't been able to look over all the regulations to see where the fallen has fouled us up, thus wasn't able to get to changing the ruling for this particular test." Team Maelstrom nodded somberly at their teacher's words. The fallen was a very upsetting subject for the team. They didn't know whether to be proud they had unmasked those traitors or worried that the fallen had purportedly vowed vengeance against them and their families. Naruto ended the uncomfortable silence by saying, "Although it is great to see you, Anko, why are you here now?" Anko, who was working on yet another dango stick, said, "If the three of you hadn't shown up together, I would have kicked the other two's butts for trying to go into the exam without a full team. But since all three of you are here, I just want to say, give them hell." With that, Anko's body flickered away and Naruto, Kiba, and Ino walked into the room. Team Maelstrom watched as various teams from Konoha and other hidden villages trickled into the waiting room. Soon the room was full Chunin hopefuls, most of who were just begging for a fight. Kiba looked around the room and then grabbed Naruto's jacket before saying, "Hey look Naruto, Drama Queen is in the house." Naruto looked and saw his friend pointing to Team 7, to be more specific, at Sasuke. Naruto looked over at Ino and, upon seeing a tick start to develop on her forehead, started to pray to the gods for his soul. Ino, while initially upset that Kiba would insult Sasuke, did not feel the usual anger that she used to feel when Sasuke was insulted in her presence before. Looking over towards Team 7, Ino did not feel the old feelings that she used to whenever she was around Sasuke. Inside her mind, Ino snapped her mental fingers and said, "Damn. It looks like I really am over Sasuke. Then that means that I do have a crush on Naruto. Well, at least I didn't get a crush on Kiba. Still, this is too good of an opening to annoy Kiba to resist." With that, Ino brought her closed fist onto the top of Kiba's head. She then said just loud enough so that her voice could carry, "Calm down Kiba. I hear that getting fixed will calm a hyper dog down, so it might work on you." Kiba narrowed his eyes and said, "That was a low blow, Ino." Ino just smirked and shot back, "You left yourself wide open for that and you know it, dog breath." "So troublesome," was heard to Team 10's left. Naruto then without turning around said, "Hello Shikamaru, how are Choji and Hinata doing?" Team 8 came into view and Hinata said, "We're doing fine," and Naruto. Only moments later Team 7 came and joined their fellow rookies. Seeing the 9 of them there, Kiba said, "Well, it looks like the rookie 9 have all showed up." Suddenly a silver-haired boy with glasses came up to the rookie 9 and said, "Not so loud you rookies. This hall is filled with ninjas, many with short tempers, and they are ready to fight." Shikamaru then said, "And who would you be?" At this the silver-haired boy gave a friendly smile and adjusted his glasses before saying, "My name's Kabuto, a fellow Konoha ninja. These exams are no picnic, let me assure you. I've seen real good ninja fail, die, or be driven insane." At this, most of the rookie 9 got sullen looks on their faces. Sakura then said in a shaky voice, "K Kabuto, how many times have you taken this exam?" Kabuto shrugged his shoulders and said, "This is my 7th time of trying to take the exam. Because of my failures, I started collecting whatever information I could on my various competitors. After all, information is power. At this point Kabuto pulled out a deck of cards and said, while we may be competitors in the exams, we are all Konoha ninja at the end of the day. On these cards in my hands I've stored information on various ninja. Just tell me the name of the ninja you would like to know more about and I'll share what I have on the person. Just as Sasuke was about to ask Kabuto for some information about Gaara of the Sand and Rock Lee, Ino and Kiba both felt Naruto lightly tugging at their clothes. The two followed Naruto over to the corner where Ino confronted Naruto. Naruto, what's going on? The Kabuto guy was about to give us a lot of information. Naruto turned to face Kiba and said, what does Akamaru say about Kabuto's power level? Kiba and Ino were confused about Naruto's question, but Kiba asked Akamaru anyway. Kiba's eyes suddenly narrowed as he said, Akamaru says that Kabuto's power level is around that Anko and just as well controlled. Ino then said in a questioning tone, how can that be? Kabuto said that he had failed 7 times, could he have just gotten back from a training trip? Naruto thought about it and then said, that is possible, but it is unlikely. Kabuto's body language is too humble and unsure to belong to a person who has gotten so strong. It is very strange that in a place like this someone would show up with information and so freely give it to people he's never met before. I'm almost certain that Kabuto's not worried about us embarrassing Konoha. There are 7 other teams from Konoha here. Kiba then said, so Naruto, what are you saying about Kabuto? Naruto shrugged his shoulders and then said, all I'm saying is that we should avoid Kabuto when we can in the exam. We need to gather more information on Kabuto before we can say what's going on for sure. Until you told me his power level, all I knew was that my gut was telling me he was bad news. Kiba and Ino just shook their heads when they heard why Naruto had originally pulled them over. While Naruto's reasoning might seem a little ridiculous to others, Kiba and Ino had come to trust their friend and leader's instincts. Due to their private conversation, Team 10 missed the altercation between Kabuto and the single team from the village hidden in sound. Just as Team 10 was about to rejoin the rest of the rookies, Ibuki walked out of a door and said, all right you mangy fools. Anyone who is not inside this room behind me and sitting in a desk in 10 minutes will be disqualified from the Chunin exams. There was then an orderly but mad rush to get into the classroom by the various genin. After all of the Chunin hopefuls were seated, several of Ibuki's assistants slowly walked around the classroom handing out writing supplies and a sheet of paper. Once the assistants had finished handing out the supplies and returned to the sides of the room, Ibuki turned to address the genin. This is the first exam of many that you hopefuls will be taking in order to become Chunin. I don't expect most of you to make it past this test, let alone have a real chance of becoming Chunin. You will answer the questions listed on the test in front of you within 1 hour. For each question you get wrong, you will lose a point. For every time we catch you cheating, you will lose 2 points. The last question will be given in 45 minutes. And one last thing, when you screw up like you inevitably will, your teammates will be forced to leave with you as well. Naruto flipped over his test and looked at the questions written on the sheet. Mentally Naruto started cursing as he read over the questions. How by the goddess am I supposed to know the answers to these questions, when I know that most jonin probably don't know the answers? Exclamation mark. Wait a minute, Ibuki said that we would lose 2 points if we were caught cheating. Normally on tests you would lose all your points if you were caught cheating. With the insane questions and lenient cheating rules, that logically means that we are supposed to cheat. That would make sense as it does test our information gathering abilities. Naruto almost let out a groan when he continued to think the situation out. However, I can't cheat well. Kiba's the main information gatherer of our team, not me. Ino I am sure will be able to cheat thanks to the mind-body transfer jutsu that is the basic skill of her family arts. There is no way that I can create a good enough genjutsu to allow me to look at someone else's sheet without getting caught. Any other way of me cheating would be too obvious. Let's face it, I'm a combat ninja without information gathering abilities, at least of the level needed for this scenario. I'll have to hope that Kiba or Ino find a way to help me. Naruto suddenly felt a paw on his foot and looked down to see Akamaru standing on his foot. Kiba's furry companion then walked in front of Naruto's normal line of sight and started to wag his tail. Suddenly Naruto realized what Akamaru was trying to do and nearly crowed inside his mind. Good boy, you're giving me the answers in Morse code by the wagging of your tail. I've got to remember to get you some doggy treats Akamaru after this is all over. 30 minutes, and cheat sheet secretly delivered, Naruto and the rest of the surviving genin were waiting for Ibuki to deliver the final question. Well, it seems that we have a good deal of intelligent ninja here, either that or a bunch of really good cheaters. Before I give you the last question, you will have to choose. You can decide not to take the question and automatically fail. However, should you decided to take the question and you get it wrong, then you will be forbidden by the various villages from even taking the Chunin exams again. The teams of genin started to rapidly decline as one by one various team members would be overcome by fear and forfeit. Naruto let the teams dwindle till he saw Sakura start to raise her hand. Although he didn't really like the girl, Naruto felt the need to help the rookie 9 whenever he could reasonably do so. Naruto then raised his voice and said, "Will you cut it with the mind games, Mr. Ibuki? This whole test has been nothing but a mind game of yours since we started. You've tested our information gathering abilities in the form of having to cheat in an impossibly hard test, and now you have to pull this latest trick on us. You may have more experience, and you may have seen more action on the field than we have, but you need to know one thing, Ibuki. We are proud ninja of the hidden villages that we represent, and we will not cower in front of a person who will play games with us." Ibuki looked across the classroom and into the eyes of the various genin sitting in front of him. Any and all uncertainty that they might have had was washed away in Naruto's speech. Ibuki was annoyed that so many had passed, but he was also proud that a fellow Konoha ninja would restore courage to his comrades. Ibuki then smirked and said, very good, it seems that someone knows how to look underneath the underneath. The brat is correct. The first part of test was on your information gathering skills. The second part of the test is to see whether you have the courage to face the unknown or if you would rather take the safe and easy path. A person lacking in either of these abilities is not worthy of becoming a chunin. By being here now, you all have proven that you have what it takes in these requirements and so have passed the first test. Before anyone could cheer, Kurenai appeared looking like she had melted out of the wall before saying, "You hopefuls may have passed the first test, but I doubt you have the strength of mind to pass my exam." Kurenai lead the remaining teams of genin test takers out of the academy and over to a training area with a large fence covered in danger signs. Kurenai then turned around to face the following genin and stated in a deadly serious tone, "This is training area 44. More infamously known among the higher-level ninja of Konoha as the Forest of Death. Over the years since Konoha's founding, this forbidden area has claimed the lives of many aspiring ninjas such as you here today. Many of those ninjas' bleached bones can still be found, littering the dens of the various predators that live here. It has been decided by the Kages and senior jonin of the various hidden villages represented here today that you need to show that you have what it takes to survive in the world of the shinobi. Therefore, you will be forced to spend up to the next 5 days within training area 44. Each team shall receive one scroll marked with either a heaven or with an earth symbol on it. You must acquire, through any mean necessary, a pair of earth and heaven scrolls. After you have the scrolls, you are to go to the tower located in the exact center of this training ground within the 5-day limit. This is no mere training exercise, this is a simulated mission under wartime that we are putting you through. Any tampering with the scrolls before you get to the tower will result in your team's forfeiture of the Chunin exam. Should one or more of your team members be killed or permanently disabled, the whole team will fail even if the surviving teammates have both scrolls. If any member of a team should leave the training ground before the 5 days are up, the whole team is disqualified. Before you are handed your team's scroll, you must all sign a waiver showing that you are willing to accept the distinct possibility of your demise within this enclosed area. Welcome to the real shinobi world. As soon as Kurenai whispered that last sentence, she faded away from the view and smell of the assembled genin. At each genin's feet appeared 2 pieces of paper. One piece of paper told them where to go to start the exercise and when the second exam would start. The other piece of paper was the waiver stating that the signer accepted full responsibility for their health and their life. Team Maelstrom, like all the assembled teams, quietly and somberly filled out the waiver before heading towards their assigned gate. At the gate was a single Chunin waiting for them. After Team Maelstrom handed their waivers to the Chunin, he gave a heaven scroll to Ino, and then he body flickered away. Once the Chunin was away, Naruto turned to face his teammates. Okay friends, Naruto started to say, I think that the best place to hide the scroll is to have Akamaru swallow the scroll. Then, once we reach the tower after getting at least an earth scroll, we can have Akamaru barf up our heaven scroll. Kiba looked down at Akamaru, who just gave a small bark of agreement, before Kiba said, okay Naruto. I'll go along with your plan. A few minutes later the gate in front of them opened with a creepy creak. Ino, Naruto, and Kiba confidently marched through the gate and began searching for some poor dumb simpletons to be relieved of an earth scroll. Makoto, hailed as the toughest girl in the southern Juban school district, was currently taking off her sweaty clothes in order to soak in the outdoor onsen of the Sakino family compound. The Sakino, formerly Namikaze, compound was a rather unique design. Its rectangular perimeter with the longer sides running north-south was protected by a tall wooden wall with a single entrance in the center of the southern wall. The first half of lower rectangle was open space for training and other gatherings. The main family compound was rectangular with 2 wings jutting to the north position so that a trapezoid could be drawn using the northern wall of the main compound and the northern ends of the 2 wings for its points. The geothermal onsen was located in the center of the space between the two wings. After removing all of her clothes, Makoto carefully stepped into the stone bath and moved herself so that she was lying on a carved bed within the bath that allowed her head and the top of her shoulders to be above water. Makoto just laid there with her eyes half closed, allowing the soothingly warm mineral water relax her tired muscles. Oblivious to the world around her, Makoto thought back on her 4-hour-long training session that she had just completed. Before Naruto had left to take the Chunin exam today, he had offered her and the rest of the travelers the option of staying in Konoha at the Sakino compound instead of just going back to Earth. Makoto had, although she hadn't voiced it to anyone, decided to accept Naruto's offer. There just really wasn't much holding her to Earth, and she had vowed to protect the lunar royal family and help it no matter the cost. Besides, Naruto had quickly grown on her just like Usagi had. That was what made her train so hard today, far harder than she had previously since she arrived on this world. If she was going to help Naruto make it in this world, she needed to be as strong as she could be. Sure, she could just be a regular civilian, but Makoto knew that such a position for her would be dangerous to Naruto with how things were now. Clan Sakino, technically made up of Naruto with the Sailor Scouts as retainers, was in a very precarious position. Between its status in Konoha and its currently weakened manpower, vultures desiring its political power or monetary wealth were bound to try and move in sooner or later. Therefore Makoto was training as hard as she could to help Naruto protect his possessions. Currently Makoto's martial art, air taijutsu, was about low to mid chunin. Her chakra output, when not in her Sailor Jupiter form, was around average to slightly high genin levels. Chakra control was around 2nd to 3rd year academy student level but quickly improving. Makoto was a veteran of several campaigns against invading monsters bent on taking over Tokyo and also was remembering more of her training from the Silver Millennium daily. However, that experience and the general battle tactics she had learned were of little use against ninjas. But Makoto was adapting to the new conditions she faced. In fact, Makoto had only an hour ago successfully completed her first jutsu. Sure, it was only a D-ranked jutsu, but it was a start. Makoto figured that, on pulling several hour-long training sessions each day, she should be able to acceptably pull off the 3 academy jutsu by the end of the week. Makoto had decided that she would not join Konoha's ninja force but remain a clan retainer with ninja training. Such a thing was uncommon but not unheard of in Konoha along with other hidden villages. Makoto opened her eyes, grabbed a bar of soap, and started to lather herself up. As she was doing this, Makoto started to talk to herself. I know that I want to stay here with Naruto, but what can I do to help him? My training is going as fast as it possibly can, but unless I transform I won't be much of a threat to anyone higher than a genin. Amy, Hotaru, and Setsuna are all training as well. Whether to stay here or just have more skills for when they return to Earth I don't know. Hotaru naturally produces medical chakra, or at least that's what the people here have classified her healing abilities. I saw her bringing several books on medical techniques into her room for study. Amy is fascinated by the sealing techniques she's found and wants to merge them with Silver Millennium magic. I could have sworn I saw Setsuna reading a book on beginner's genjutsu. That, plus I've seen her training late at night with her time key. She's a master at bojutsu. All I have is Tai and ninjutsu along with my household skills. Sure, Naruto doesn't care about that at all. However, I really want to help him. He's just given me so much just trying to be friendly, and that's not considering what I owed Usagi that transferred to him. He doesn't care at all about that debt and only used the scout's bond to him in order to help us have an accepted place in this society. Still, what can I offer him that will truly help him out and shows that I care about him? Makoto submerged herself in order to rinse off the soap suds. As Makoto's head broke the surface of the water she strangely thought she heard Usagi's voice once more softly speak to her. You could offer to bear his child. At this Makoto rapidly looked around her trying to find the source of the voice she thought she had heard. Makoto then, after assuring herself that no one was around, sunk deeper into the water and started to talk to herself again. Weird, I must be more stressed than I thought. Why would I think of a thing like offering to give Naruto a child? I mean I know that he needs an heir, the sooner the better, but I can't just do something like that. Naruto may be handsome, friendly, considerate, helpful, and a good person, but something like offering to give birth to a child is way off the chart for how things are between us. We've barely known each other for 2 weeks, let alone gone on a date. Add to that's the fact that I'm barely 16 and he's just turned 14 4 months ago. Makoto then got out of the onsen and, without bothering to cover her form with a towel, headed for her room. Once in her room, Makoto changed into a set of cloths that Luna had bought for her under Naruto's directions. Naruto had done this for her, Akuko, and the other scouts because he wanted them to have durable clothes to wear that would also allow them to blend in with the rest of the Konoha population. Makoto laid on her bed for a few minutes before she remembered a comment that Luna had said the other day to her and the rest of the scouts. What does that cat mean by wives? Makoto then headed over to the family library to see what Luna meant by that comment. Naruto was on the top bunk of the twin bed in Team Maelstrom's room at the tower. Hyuga was on the bottom bunk with Akamaru on the dog boy's chest. Ino had claimed the sole double bed in the room. Team Maelstrom was the second team to the tower, beaten by the sand team of Gaara, Temari, and Konkuro by only 15 minutes. Naruto was just staring at the ceiling while his mind raced over the events of the earlier day. Out of all the genin at the exam, Naruto found himself thinking about Gaara most of all. There was something about Gaara that unsettled Naruto, and Naruto wanted to know why. Actually, there were 3 people in this exam that put Naruto on edge. Gaara, Kabuto, and someone else that he hadn't been able to get a clear picture of. However, these 3 people all gave off a slightly different feel of worry for Naruto. Gaara put Naruto on his toes, like a person would be around an unknown volcano. Kabuto was like a viper, dangerous but could be possibly handled with extreme care. The last person that Naruto had felt, well, it could only be described as unnatural. There was something about that last presence that demanded that it be eradicated. Over and over again Naruto thought about those 3 people. Gaara, who Naruto felt could become less of a danger, Kabuto, who Naruto felt should be avoided, and finally that last unknown person who should be destroyed. Naruto got so frustrated with it all that he started talking to himself. Okay Naruto, let's look at this rationally. Something about those 3 makes you nervous. It can't just be they're strong ninjas. After all, Hyuga and Ino didn't get nervous around Kabuto until Akamaru told Hyuga how powerful Kabuto was. Turning over on his side, Naruto then said while looking at the waxing moon shine through the window. Could that be the reason why? Could it be because of my bloodline that I'm sensing something off about those 3? But that doesn't make any sense at all. Makoto, Amy, Hotaru, Setsuna, and the Sailor Scouts on Earth all have their senshi forms, and their bloodlines are extremely close to my own. However, I don't recall them or Luna ever, when talking about their battles with monsters and other threats, ever mentioning a feeling like this. I mean, the lunar royal family was basically a supercharged family of senshi who, through kind and benevolent ruling and the protection they offered, became the rulers of the Silver Millennium. Naruto then shook his head. Anyone who could truly and fully explain his heritage was long dead. There were probably things about his bloodline that he would never know simply because the information had been lost. One thing that having the villagers' hostility directed towards him had taught Naruto was to focus on reality. Currently, reality was that he was in the middle of a very important and dangerous test. A test that he would handle better if he got a full night of sleep, so Naruto closed his eyes and tried to relax. Naruto suddenly opened his eyes to find himself once again among the ruins of the Silver Millennium. Looking down at himself, Naruto discovered that he wasn't wearing his pajamas or his regular ninja outfit but rather his Moonlight Knight uniform. Naruto closed his eyes for a second in order to make sure that he wasn't hallucinating. Upon opening his eyes and seeing that he was in fact among the ruins, Naruto let out a brilliant smile. If he was here, then most likely his grandmother, Queen Serenity, was here as well. She could probably answer any questions that he might have about his heritage. A quick glance around the area revealed to Naruto that Queen Serenity wasn't in the immediate vicinity. Noticing a stone path leading away from the ruins and where he was at, Naruto thought about his options. Almost instantly Naruto decided to walk down the path to try and find Queen Serenity. The winding path quickly led away from the main sections of the palace ruins. Soon Naruto noticed that the grass along the path was greener and longer than it had previously been. Finally, after turning to corner of a partially moss-covered stone wall, Naruto spotted Queen Serenity. She was in a plain simple white dress sitting on a stone bench by a pond. In her hand was a fishing pole, and down next to the bench was a small tackle box. Queen Serenity turned to face Naruto, smiled and then said, "Come over here Naruto and sit down. The fish are really biting today. I was expecting you, so I brought an extra fishing pole if you want to fish as well." Naruto quickly hurried over to sit down on the bench. While quite mature, Naruto was still a young man who wanted to spend time with his grandma. Naruto was only on the bench for a few seconds when Queen Serenity handed Naruto a baited fishing pole and said, "Now be careful Naruto. The pieces will try and steal the bait of the hook, so you've got to react to any changes in the pull of the tackle on the pole." Naruto gratefully accepted the fishing pole and cast the hook out into the lake. The two of them just spent the next few minutes in small talk about the Sailor Scouts and how things were generally going in Konoha. Just after Naruto reeled in a large fish, Queen Serenity then turned to him with a smile and said, "That was a lot of fun Naruto, you should visit more often so we can do that again. However, I believe that it's now time for me to start explaining your emerging powers to you." At this, Naruto became very serious and remembered why he had first been looking for Queen Serenity. Queen Serenity then collected the fishing poles and placed the fish into the tackle box. She then turned to give Naruto her undivided attention and started to speak. Naruto, as you know, there were several changes that happened to your lunar royal heritage due to your father sealing the Kyuubi within you. To explain what it was that you were feeling during the exam towards those three people requires a little bit of a background in so aspects of your powers. One of the biggest things that differs a senshi from a regular person, besides the fact that they draw power from a particular planet, is that they have two chakra natures while a regular person has only one. One of those natures is dominate when you're in civilian form and the other when in senshi form. With training, a senshi can treat both their natures as the dominate nature at the same time no matter what form they are in. Now you might want to know how that relates to what you're currently experiencing towards those three people, right? This is where the Kyuubi comes in. Not only did it permanently increase the energy you and your future children draw from your planet's source, but the demon physically enhanced you as well. Besides your great self-healing abilities, the demon boosted your natural senses, which will become more obvious the older you get. In boosting your senses, the latent extrasensory perception sense within all humans was for you linked to one of your chakra natures. Naruto, your natures are wind, which is your civilian nature, and celestial, which was the nature linked. Celestial chakra is, in layman's terms, holy chakra. It has no weakness in the primary and secondary chakra cycles that the ninjas will teach you. Celestial chakra is also very effective against demons, darkness-consumed people, and abominations against nature. That someone set off your sixth sense means that they fall into the stated categories that celestial chakra is strong against or are closely connected to them. Naruto nodded his head in order to show his grandma that he understood what she was telling him. Naruto then pulled her into a hug and said, "Thank you, Grandma Serenity. I love you as much as I love Grandma Akuko. I just wish I could come here more often to visit you." Queen Serenity wrapped her arms around Naruto, brought her forehead down to his head, and gently spoke. "Don't worry, Naruto, I love you too. Remember, even though I'm not there for you most of the time, I'm always there for you when you really need me." Naruto felt a mist roll in and Queen Serenity's arms fade away from him. By the time Queen Serenity's presence could no longer be felt by Naruto, he had already fallen into a deep sleep. At the end of the 5-day limit, a total of 7 teams managed to complete the second test of the Chunin exam. The 21 genin were now assembled in front of Sarutobi and a few other high-ranking ninjas waiting for the Hokage to speak. Sarutobi looked into each of the eyes of the assembled genin and started to speak. "I commend you all for making it this far. The large number of you assembled here shows just how talented you all are, and the strength of your villages. However, the fact that so many of you have done so well presents a bit of a problem. You see, the final part of the exam is tournament where you young hopefuls shall battle in front of the lords of the various lands. This tournament allows you to display not only that you have the qualities to become Chunin, but also the strength of your particular village. As you all know, a village's strength is the strength of its ninja, and a ninja's full strength can only be seen in a life or death struggle. Therefore, the matches of this tournament shall be till knockout, death, or if the ref decides to end the match due to a contestant completely overpowering their opponent so that the victor cannot be contested. Now you can see the problem with the number of you here. The lords of the various lands' time are valuable. Thus, we shall hold a preliminary tournament right now with the same rules as the main rounds of the tournament. If any of you desire to withdraw now, you may do so without it harming your teammates, because as of right now the test focuses on you all as individuals." Only Kabuto withdrew from the tournament, claiming that he was too exhausted from the previous test to handle the exam. Sarutobi nodded his head, signaling that Kabuto could leave, and then the Hokage gave the floor to the referee Gekko Hayate. Gekko then coughed and said to the genin, "I would like you all to pay attention to that board over there. The names of the participants of the matches shall randomly appear on the board. All peoples whose names do not appear on the board are to head upstairs where they can watch the matches until their name is called." The board started flashing names until 2 names appeared: Ino Yamanaka and Sasuke Uchiha. Naruto noticed Kakashi whisper something to Sasuke before Kakashi and the rest of the ninjas headed to the second floor to watch the fight. Sasuke was expecting to be facing just another fangirl like Sakura, and so didn't get into a stance when Gekko called the start of the match. Ino, on the other hand, took Sasuke very seriously. She knew that her usual tricks of genjutsu wouldn't work on him since he had the Sharingan. Also, except for one technique that Anko had helped her create, her other techniques were too slow to be effective against her former crush. A plan formed within Ino's mind. It was a gamble, but it was her best shot at making it to the final rounds. Up in the stands, Tamari, for some reason unknown to her, decided to go over to Naruto and ask him his opinion of the match. On approaching the blonde boy, Tamari said, "So Naruto, what do you think of your teammates' chances?" Ignoring the look of surprise on Kiba's face that Temari was talking to him, Naruto spoke his mind. To be honest, Temari, it doesn't look good for Ino. While she is a very talented ninja, Sasuke's skill and bloodline give him a natural advantage over those areas that Ino is weak in. She's not out yet, but victory for Ino will, as far as I can see, depends on her pulling off a certain combo of techniques. If she pulls them off, she's won. However, should she make a single mistake in the combo, she's lost the match. Down in the stadium, Ino had very discreetly connected her fingertips to some thin wires. The wires were in two small wrist pouches that Ino was wearing that were hidden from sight by seals that Amy had created for Ino before the exam. Ino then quickly made the necessary hand seals and said, lighting release, shocking silver palms. With that, Ino whipped her hands forward, sending the now electrified wires towards Sasuke. Sasuke, who was too surprised that one of his annoying fangirls would actually attack him, was hit dead on by Ino's attack. The proud Uchiha was brought to his knees as he screamed in pain from the electric attack. On seeing her opponent on his knees, Ino cut off the electricity flowing towards Sasuke. While some like Sakura might say that this was because Ino didn't want to hurt Sasuke, the fact of the matter was the shocking silver palms was a big chakra-draining jutsu. Ino knew the limits of the amount of chakra she could currently produce and had known that if she held that particular jutsu a second longer she wouldn't have enough chakra to finish her plan. Ino put her hands and fingers into the proper position for her final technique and yelled out. Ninja art. Mind-body switch. With that, Ino's body collapsed as a ball of energy containing part of her spirit slowly flew at Sasuke. Up in the stands, Naruto was silently praying that Ino's possession technique would reach Sasuke before the boy regained his senses. Also in the stands was the serpent himself, Orochimaru. Orochimaru didn't want his future body to be beaten so easily, not when certain plans of his required the last Uchiha to be in the finals of the Chunin exams. Orochimaru sent a small portion of his own chakra into Sasuke's cursed seal. The pain of the seal partially, but not visibly, activating caused Sasuke to pay attention to his surroundings more. Sasuke saw Ino's mind-body switch attack coming at him and barely managed to duck away from the attack. He then rushed at Ino's defenseless body with rage visible in his eyes to anyone who could clearly look into them. The Avenger then placed the heel of his foot on Ino's neck, placed a kunai at the back of her head, turned to Gekko and said, "If you don't declare me the winner now, she dies." Gekko hastily declared Sasuke the winner of that match in order to save Ino's life. Up in the observation level, 3 different people were thinking of the situation beyond the shock that most of the genin held for the match. Sarutobi was deeply saddened that such a promising young ninja would be so callous towards a fellow Konoha ninja. Kakashi was saddened that his pupil would go to such lengths in order to win. However, Kakashi assumed that it must be the influence of Orochimaru's seal on Sasuke, something that Kakashi was determined to fix ASAP. Orochimaru was pleased with how Sasuke was turning out to be and couldn't wait to see what the boy would do in the main part of the exams. After Sasuke and Ino were led off the field, Naruto had to fight a boy named Yoroi Akato. Yoroi was a bit of a challenge for Naruto in that the boy could absorb chakra. In order to win, Naruto used an exploding shadow clone to knock his opponent out. Next fight was Kiba versus Sakura. That fight was no challenge for Kiba. Naruto only paid half attention to the rest of the fights, just so that he knew what to expect out of his opponents. However, there was one fight that really made his blood boil. The fight that made Naruto so angry was the fight between Hinata Hyuga and Neji Hyuga. Naruto was thoroughly disgusted at how Neji first tried to trash talk his way to victory. Both of the boys of Team Maelstrom cheered Hinata on, allowing the shy girl to have the confidence to battle her more skilled opponent. However, the straw that broke the camel's back for Naruto was when Neji went in for a killing blow right when Hinata wouldn't give up. Naruto, Kiba, and the other winners of the preliminaries were called down to draw numbers after Hinata was taken to the ER. After everyone had gotten their numbers and shown them to the clerk, Sarutobi said, "Now then, the matches of the final part of the Chunin exam are as follows: Naruto Sakino versus Temari of the Sand, Sasuke Uchiha versus Gaara of the Sand, Shino Aburame versus Konkuro of the Sand, Kiba Inuzuka versus Neji Hyuga, and finally Shikamaru Nara versus Dosu Kinyuda. You all have 1 month to train until the tournament. I hope you all do your villages proud." Dismissed. Omake. Naruto was walking down the hall of the Sakino clan house in his Moonlight Knight outfit. He really didn't want to do so but had at the request of Auntie Luna. As he neared the family room of the compound he heard the sounds of girls' voices before they suddenly grew quiet. Naruto then opened the door to the room finding it to be pitch black. Naruto flipped on the lights to see Amy, Minako, Rei, Makoto, Hotaru, Haraka, Michiru, and Setsuna all sitting on a large Persian carpet. They were all dressed in clothes like the genie wore on I Dream of Genie that were in their Fucus colors. Naruto was gapping in surprise as he said, "Wah. What's going on here and why are you girls dressed like that? At this Makoto got up, walked over to Naruto and smiled saying. It's Halloween on Earth and all 9 of us have been invited to a costume party. All of us girls got together and decided that we'll all go as a themed set. At this Naruto scratched his head and said, ah, what theme? At this Amy said, why as a sultan and his concubines of course. Ino, Hiba, and Naruto were all heading down to the infirmary to check on Hinata. They had unanimously agreed that they would go check up on Hinata's condition before they went to look for Anko. Team Maelstrom didn't bother asking for directions because Akamaru had Hinata's scent memorized and the little ninja dog was walking in the lead. Akamaru led them over to a plain door and promptly plopped himself in front of the door and whined piteously. Ino looked between the door, Akamaru, Hiba, and then back to the door. She then felt a tic start to develop as she said in frustration, Hiba, teach Akamaru to signal us better next time. Ino then opened the door allowing Team Maelstrom to see inside. At the exact center of the room was a plain bed with white sheets on it. Hinata was under the bed sheets looking more dead than alive. Her normally shy but caring eyes were closed showing that she was in a deep sleep. On the right side of the bed sat a worried Shikamaru and Choji. On the other side of the bed leaning against the wall was a fuming Asuma. All 3 guys immediately turned to face the door when they heard the sound of the door opening. The conscious members of Team 8 realized from the worried faces of Team Maelstrom that they were worried about Hinata. Asuma, as if in acknowledgement of a silent question, nodded his head. Team Maelstrom then all entered the room closing the door behind them. There was an uncomfortable silence within the room until Kiba spoke up. When do the doctors say that Hinata will be better? Asuma was the one who answered Kiba's question. Taking out his lit cigarette, Asuma almost growled out, the doctors say that she'll be able to leave the hospital in 2 weeks. It will take another week after she's released before she'll be fit to handle light duty. On hearing this news, Team Maelstrom started leaking killing intent for a few minutes before they were able to calm down. After Team Maelstrom calmed down, Asuma looked straight into Naruto's eye and said, thank you Naruto. If it wasn't for you allowing that retainer of yours to work with the medical staff, I'm told that Hinata's condition would be far more critical. It's just a shame that Hotaru was exhausted from healing the other competitors or Hinata would in full health. Naruto just shook his head before he responded to Asuma's statement. There's no need to thank me for Hotaru's work. She wanted to learn how to use the part of her bloodline that allowed her to heal others to the best of her ability. What kind of a person would I be if I was to prevent a member of my family from pursuing such a noble goal? Still, I'll pass on your thanks to Hotaru. Hotaru really needs to get used to people praising her abilities. After the little exchange between Asuma and Naruto, the room became quiet once more. The quiet, however, didn't last too long. Hiba slowly walked towards the bed until he was standing right next to Hinata's shoulder. Hiba placed his hand softly, but at the same time firmly, on Hinata's shoulder. Hiba then softly spoke and everyone in the room strained to hear his words. I swear Hinata, I'll make that bastard pay for what he's done to you. Once I'm done with him, Neji will no longer be considered the pride of the Hyuga clan. Hiba then slowly made his way back to his teammates ignoring the surprised looks coming from Choji and Asuma. Ino, who was closest to the door, then quietly opened the door. Then she, Naruto, and finally Kiba marched out of the room leaving Team 8 alone in peace. As soon as Ino had closed the door, Naruto took the lead of the team. Naruto was leading them out of the hospital and to the place he figured they could first expect Anko to be, the Dango stand. Both he and Kiba needed to talk to Anko about their training for the upcoming tournament while Ino needed to plan what changes she should make in her training regime. Team Maelstrom wasn't out of the lobby of the hospital when they met Anko, who was looking for them as well. Anko took a look at her team and smiled. While Anko's smile usually was a signal to other Jonin to get out of dojo, Anko's students could see her pride in them from the smile. Anko then said in her cheerful voice, well done all of you. Naruto and Kiba, you won just like I was expecting you guys to do. Ino, I'm very impressed with how you handled your fight considering that the odds were against you. Ino blushed from Anko's praise. She had been afraid that Anko would be mad that she had lost. Sticking her head up high, Ino then asked, Anko, what's the plan for our training now? Are Naruto and Kiba going to get any extra help to prepare them for the tournament? Both Naruto and Kiba looked from Ino to Anko and back to Ino before they locked eyes with each other. In their eyes both boys could see that they didn't like how Ino seemed to think that she would be left behind. Anko just shook her head and said, I can't train Naruto or Kiba. According to Chunin regulations, a Jonin sensei with 2 or more students competing in the final round of the Chunin exam at the same time may not train any of the competing students. Supposedly this is to keep the students from having an unfair knowledge of one of their competitors' styles. While there have been exemptions to the rule with on the said students as the last member of his clan, none of Team Maelstrom technically qualify for that exemption. Ino and Kiba both understood what Anko was trying to get across to them. Naruto was the only fully qualified ninja of the Sakino clan. He was also the only actual blood member of the Sakino clan. However, due to the Sailor Scouts being Naruto's retainers, it had apparently been ruled that Naruto didn't qualify for the exception. Naruto saw that Ino and Kiba were starting to feel sorry for him and decided to end it. Thank you for tell us Anko. Just out of curiosity, are you allowed to suggest trainers for me and Kiba? Anko's smile got wider as she saw what Naruto was trying to do. Anko then cheerfully answered Naruto, yes I can Naruto. For the next month I'll be training Ino with the help of my friend Kurenai Yuhi. Kiba's best bet for a trainer would be either his mother or his sister Hana. However, Anko's smile faded as she continued to speak. Sadly Naruto, finding a teacher for you is a bit of a pickle. I was going to have Kakashi train you, but due to Orochimaru being spotted in the area, the council wants Kakashi to stick close to Sasuke for that boy's protection and training. The other Jonin that I know of who could help you out are all currently on long-term missions. Anko saw Naruto's eyes lower slightly on hearing that she wasn't able to find a teacher for him like she was able to suggest one for Kiba. Anko then said, don't worry Naruto. Have you forgotten that you have all of your clan scrolls back in your family library? That thing's almost 3/4 the size of the village's public library and it's packed with information for you to learn. You have reasonable chakra control and know how to practice that to get better. Use those tools and spar with a few chunin like Iruka, that should get you to a level to pass the final exam. If any of the people I want to train you become able to train you, I'll send them your way. After Anko's little speech to cheer Naruto up, the 4 members of Team Maelstrom parted ways. Tamari was asleep on her bed in her room at the hotel. All the lights were out, but if one could see her they would find Tamari restlessly rolling around on her bed. Once in a while Tamari gave out a loud moan, but not loud enough for her teammates to hear her in the next room. Suddenly Tamari's eyes shot open and she bolted to a sitting position on her mattress. Tamari took a few deep breaths before she ran her fingers through her hair. With her fingers still in her hair, Tamari brought her elbows to rest on her now propped up knees. Tamari then started to talk to herself in an angry and yet scared tone. What's going on Tamari old girl? You've never had dreams like this before, don't let it get to you. Tamari then let her head fall back onto the pillow before she continued to talk to herself about the dream. Why now? Why of all the guys you know did it have to be him? Tamari closed her eyes and thought back to what she had dreamed. Tamari's dream had started off at an oasis about 5 miles east of Suna. She knew the oasis's location because it was her favorite place to go to whenever she needed to get away from Suna. It was night at the oasis with no clouds in the sky and the new moon faintly visible due to earthshine. She could even now feel the soft cool winds that were gently blowing around her in her dreams. In the dream Tamari had, as she loved to do when alone at that oasis, been in the middle of taking a bath. Tamari recalled hearing her name being called by someone that she felt drawn to. She had then rose out of the oasis and, while completely forgetting her clothes, started walking out into the deeper part of the desert. The still warm sand on the ground was comforting to her as she walked. She had eventually reached a small white tent with an open door flap. Tamari's dream self had almost rushed inside the tent as soon as she saw it. In the real world, Tamari's cheeks started to turn red as she started to remember what had happened further in the dream. She had in her dream, as soon as she had entered the tent, found that she was wrapped up in a pair of strong arms. She and then turned to passionately kiss the young man to whom the arms belonged. What the two of them had proceeded to do with and for each other in the dream made Tamari's real body turn red in embarrassment. But the thing about the dream that really got to Tamari was that her lover in the dream was none other than Naruto Sakino. Tamari got so frustrated with herself that she threw off the blankets and with only her light pink pajamas on, marched out onto her room's balcony. She then leaned her elbows on the railing in such a way that her arms were propped up, folded her fingers together, and rested her chin on her folded hands. Without moving her head, Tamari shifted her gaze over to the almost full moon hanging in the sky. Normally looking at the moon relaxed Tamari, but now it only reminded her of Naruto. Letting out a sigh of exasperation, Tamari shook her head and started to talk to herself. What is with me? I mean, I've only spent an hour max with the kid and I can't get him out of my head. Sure, he was friendly towards me and he seems to know what he's doing as a ninja. His victory in the preliminaries and his analysis of his teammates' chances show that well enough. But that doesn't explain why he's on my mind so much, and now to make it worse, he's showing up in my dreams. Why is that? It had been 3 days since Naruto had returned home from the Forest of Death and the second part of the Chunin exams. All 7 members of the Sakino clan were sitting down at the dinner table enjoying breakfast. Naruto was really enjoying it because Makoto had whipped up something called chocolate waffles that he had never had before. As Makoto watched Naruto dig into the waffles on his plate with gusto, a tiny smile appeared on her face. Luna, who had been carefully watching the scouts and Naruto closely, was busy thinking about what she was seeing happen in front of her. Although she was still leery at the idea of Naruto having more than one wife, was starting to accept the idea. Luna also had a good idea of who at least two of Naruto's future wives would be. One need only look at Amy or Makoto to see that they falling hard for Whiskered Prince. Also, Luna could see that her little nephew was growing very close to the two girls. Naruto's more than platonic concern for those two senshi was visible in his eyes even if he himself hadn't realized how deeply he cared about the girls yet. As breakfast went on, Luna started to let her thoughts drift about the situation between Naruto, Makoto, and Amy. The matchmaker part of her started to wonder how the two girls would both get together with Naruto. If Luna's guess was right, Makoto and Naruto would be the first to get together. Knowing their personalities, Makoto would be the one to confront Naruto about their shared feelings and start off their courtship. Amy, on the other hand, would most likely need a push from Makoto to confess her feelings to Naruto. Looking over to Hotaru and Setsuna, Luna could see their amusement at the drama starting to develop in front of them. Hotaru, as she had confessed to Luna, had started to see Naruto as a big brother to her even though she was actually a month or so older than him. Through the strange workings of people in the Sakino home, had somehow found herself in the position of aunt to the younger scouts and Naruto. Setsuna, to the surprise to those that knew her on Earth, took her new position in the family with a little amusement and several big smiles. What made Luna all the happier when she saw everyone eating together was the fact that she knew that things would be like this for a long time. When Naruto had arrived home 3 days ago, each of the scouts had come to him separately and told him that they wanted to stay in Konoha and help him. The look of pure happiness on Naruto's face when he was told that news reminded Luna of the few times she had been able to afford a birthday present for Naruto that he had really wanted. Only Akuko, understandably, was going to return to Earth once the spell could be used. However, Akuko had promised to visit Naruto. Suddenly Luna stopped her train of thought as her ears picked up something interesting that Amy was saying to everyone. As I was saying, from my calculations and the material I've gleaned from the library, it can work. Sure, it would take me several months or even years before I could do it completely on my own, but that's only if I do everything by myself. If we were to stumble across a willing and capable seal master, this seal array that I've designed could be completed in a month or two. With my seal array placed near the time gates, we could cast the trans-dimensional spell once or maybe even twice a day. Setsuna was the first to respond to Ami's little impromptu speech by saying, "That's amazing, Amy. With your seal array we could move back and forth between Konoha and Tokyo depending on which place needed the scouts help the most. Also, do you realize that we could also use your array to start trade between Earth and the elemental countries? However, I personally would suggest against such a course of action, at least for the moment. Trying to set up a trade route between Earth and the elemental countries for anything besides for the Sakino clan would cause lots of problems that we are ill-equipped to handle at the moment." Naruto, who had finished his waffles and was a little sad that there wasn't any more, just looked up at Amy and smiled at her, causing Ami's cheeks to be tinted with a hint of blush. Naruto then started to up his thoughts on Ami's seal array idea. "Great idea, Amy. This seal array of yours is just amazing. It completely puts my father's work to shame and he's hailed as the best seal master who ever lived. Once you get enough practice to be able to create your seals in real life, you'll have every seal master on the continent wanting to be trained by you." Amy bowed her head to try and hide the blush that was now completely covering her cheeks from Naruto. A minute later, Akuko put her fork and knife down on her plate and asked everyone at the table, "So what are your plans for today?" Naruto stated that he was going to go and see if Iruka could spar with him for a while. Hotaru quietly told everyone that she was going to take a shift at the hospital as well as pick up some new study material. Apparently the head of the hospital had decided to give her all of Kabuto Yakushi's medical books after the revealed spy had left Konoha. Amy was going to practice actually creating some of the basic seals that she was learning about instead of just figuring out what could be done with the Mercury computer to model a hypothetical seal for her. Makoto said that she was going to practice her chakra control and work on a few D-ranked jutsus. Luna was going to go to a clan meeting that Sarutobi had called for some reason. Only Setsuna and Akuko herself didn't mention what they were planning to do for the day. With that, everyone left to go do what they wanted to do. Naruto was walking through Konoha without a real destination in mind. He had gone to Iruka's house to ask his old teacher if he wouldn't mind a spar. Unfortunately for Naruto, Iruka was up to his eyeballs in homework that needed to be graded and turned into the principal by the end of the day. Therefore, it was with a heavy heart that the scared Chunin was forced to ask Naruto to leave. Thus Naruto was left to just wander around Konoha just trying to think of what he should do. True, He could go back home and study some more jutsus from his family library, but what would be the point? Just knowing a lot of jutsus did not guarantee a person victory. It was how a ninja integrated his jutsus into his fighting style and his knowing when to apply his jutsus to a situation that lead to victory. Even Kakashi Hatake, who was said to have copied over 1,000 jutsu, only used between 10 to 15 jutsus in his vast collection regularly. No, what Naruto needed was not a large number of jutsus but rather a competent sensei to help him improve. A sensei that could look at what Naruto was doing and could give him pointers on what he needed to correct. Say what you will about Anko, but to Naruto she was a grade A sensei. She may not have actually taught him any techniques besides water walking, but she had helped him see the holes in his ability and had been able to offer him great advice on what he could do to fix those holes. Sadly, due to the Chunin exam rules, Anko temporarily couldn't teach him, and all of Anko's friends that could help him were unavailable. Naruto almost cursed his luck. It wasn't like he was going to just bump into a person that could help him prepare. Naruto wasn't looking where he was going and accidentally ran into someone who was walking in his direction. Knocked out of his self-pitying thoughts, Naruto turned around to face the person he had walked into and called out, "Sorry for walking into you, sir." Naruto turned to get a better look at the person behind him that he had hit. The man was facing away from Naruto and was wearing a leather patchwork cloak. Naruto started to get a sinking feeling that he knew who it was that he had walked into. The man called out, "Yes, you should be sorry that you walked into me." The man turned around so that Naruto could see his face. Looking straight into Naruto's eyes, Jakar continued, "You should be more aware of your surroundings, young Storm." Naruto felt his body unconsciously shifting to a defensive stance. Jakar noticed Naruto's movement and had to keep a smirk from showing on his face. The young man in front of him was shaping up to be what he needed to be. However, there was something in Naruto's eyes that bothered Jakar, something that demanded that Jakar spend more time with Naruto. However, before Jakar could find out what he wanted to know, he would need to get Naruto to open up to him. This would probably been a little tricky considering how they first met. Jakar slowly opened his hands so that Naruto could see that he was not going to immediately attack the boy. Jakar then said in his usual merry and slightly humorous voice, "Calm down, young Storm, you're causing a scene. I assume that you're worried about whether or not I'll attack you. Don't worry, that mission is behind us both. Besides, this is Konoha. Do you think that your gate guards would let me into the village if I was here to cause trouble? I'll even show you my visitor's pass if that is what it will take." Naruto narrowed his eyes even as he relaxed his guard. He then said to Jakar in a firm, but not hostile tone, "No offense, but the last time we met we were in a death match after you sent all those bandits for me and my teammates to kill. Don't take it too personally if I find myself a little wary around you for the time being." Seeing that Jakar hadn't made any hostile actions towards him or any civilians, Naruto was willing to give Jakar the benefit of the doubt. It after all wasn't that uncommon for ninjas to fight each other in one mission and then have to work together in a later mission. Getting out of his relaxed defensive stance, Naruto said in a more neutral tone, "I'll trust you not to harm anyone in this village. Break my trust, and I'll do everything in my power to have you hunted down and killed." Jakar's face broke out into a small smile. While a civilian may have thought that Jakar and Naruto were personal enemies from how Naruto spoke to him, both ninjas knew better. They had simply recognized that each was a former opponent to be respected and an opponent that they could now be on respectful, if not friendly, terms with. Without the guarded battle-ready mask on Naruto's face, Jakar could see that something was obviously bothering Naruto. Remembering that the Chunin exam finals were being held in a month and that Naruto's name was on the list of competitors, Jakar made a guess at what was bothering Naruto. Going out on a limb, Jakar asked in a friendly and genuinely concerned tone, "What's wrong, young Storm? Is there something with the upcoming tournament that is bothering you?" Naruto thought about Jakar's question for a moment. It was true that his lack of a sensei to help him out was really bothering him, but should he reveal this fact to Jakar? Naruto thought hard about this for a moment. Jakar was powerful and a skilled fighter, of this Naruto knew for a fact. Also, it seemed that Jakar was apparently genuinely concerned about what was bugging Naruto. On the other hand, Jakar was not from Konoha and had fought against Naruto. Naruto quickly disregarded that fact as he had long ago vowed to give people a fair chance, and Jakar fighting for the Narn's beliefs could not be held against the main in front of him. Finally, just when Jakar was starting to get worried about Naruto due to his lack of response, Naruto calmly spoke. "Yes, Jakar, there is something that is bothering me. You see, due to the fact that I have a teammate who has also made it to the finals, my regular sensei can't teach me until after the tournament is over. Unfortunately, my sensei Anko can't find someone to help me with my training due to the fact that all of the people she would send me to are unavailable." Naruto's voice held only the faintest hints of the sadness that this fact caused him. Even though Naruto tried to hide his sadness from Jakar, the experienced ninja was able to pick up on this fact. Jakar thought about Naruto's situation for just a second to go over what he was about to say, before Jakar opened his mouth. Naruto, I know that we don't know each other very well, but would you mind if I was to help train you until the Chunin tournament? Jakar's offer surprised Naruto because he never expected Jakar to do anything about his situation except offer condolences. Naruto's eyes started to widen as hope and joy started to grow with Naruto's heart. After his encounter with Jakar, Naruto had done some research on the Narn clansmen. Naruto's research had revealed that Jakar was widely hailed by many shinobi throughout the elemental countries as an equal to any of the Sannin. The chance to learn under such a ninja would really help Naruto out in the Chunin exam, and Naruto knew it. Still, dealing with angry civilians when he was younger had made Naruto cautious of offers of help from people he didn't know well. Therefore, Naruto asked, "You would really train me, Jakar?" Jakar nodded his head before he answered in his slightly energetic manner, "Of course, young Storm. Even without your very impressive bloodline powers, you have unimaginable power sleeping within you. To help awaken that talent and power that sleeps within you, well, that will be something for me to brag about years from now. You may not know it, Naruto, but a Akari is expected to help all the less skilled members of the Narn clan. As an ally of the Narn clan due to the circumstances of our last meeting, my training you cannot be argued against in a court by any people that may be against it." Jakar then stuck his hand out for Naruto to shake it, closing the deal on him training Naruto. Naruto let out a bright carefree smile before he reached out and firmly grasped Jakar's offered hand. The new student and sensei shook their hands twice before letting go of the handshake. Naruto then looked up into Jakar's red eyes and said with fire in his eyes, "So Jakar, where do you want to go to start my training?" Jakar said with a slight chuckle in his voice, "Calm down, young Storm, we'll get to your training soon enough. First things first though, we need to go and find a friend of mine in this village. He'll be helping me train you. After we get my friend, we will all go to a training field and you and I will have a spar. You won't be allowed to use your bloodline for the spar though, it will simply be your own power and skill." Naruto nodded his head, fully agreeing to what Jakar was telling him. It was great in Naruto's mind that Jakar was going to train him and that Jakar was taking his training so seriously. Also have another trainer help him, even if the other person turned out to only be a Chunin, was a big plus in Naruto's mind. Jakar then started to walk down the road and Naruto quickly followed next to his new sensei. About 5 minutes of walking after the deal was struck, Naruto felt his curiosity get the best of him, so he asked, "So Jakar, who are we looking for?" Jakar then turned his head to look down at Naruto and said, "We're looking for an old friend of mine. Perhaps you have heard of him, his name is Jiraiya.